Well, good morning and welcome to another meeting of Audit and Governance on the 12th of June. It's very warm in here, so feel free to take jackets off if you haven't already done so if you wish to. Some housekeeping as usual. Please turn your mobile phones off. Keep your volumes down on your laptops so we don't get to interruptions on that front. And please introduce yourself prior to speaking. I'm Councillor Richard Biggs from Poundbury Ward. Okay, we've also welcomed Councillor Batstone to the committee. Welcome, and we look forward to your contributions. I'm sure it'll be very valued with your experience, so we look forward to that. And replacing Bill Pipe. Also online, we've got Robin Legg, who is a member of this committee, but due to back injury, is unable to drive at the moment. Also virtually, we have Councillor Gary Suttle. From SWAP, we've got Sally White and Angie Hooper, and also Ian House from Deloitte online. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies, please, Susan?
Thank you. There are no apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the minutes on page 5 to 10. I hope you've all had a chance to read them, and we're happy to accept those. Are there any updates on any points that will not be covered on the agenda? I'm not aware of anything. Okay. Next item then is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from any members, please? I'm not seeing any hands up. Nope, nothing online. And item 4 is public participation. Have we received any things from the public? Any submissions, please?
No public participation for this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we live in hope. You never know, one day. Okay, so next item on the agenda is item 5. We've covered that, sorry. Item 6, update preparation of the accounts, which I believe Aidan or Mr. Kramer is going to deal with. Okay, I'll let you introduce that. I think it's fair to say that there is very little on the agenda today. One reason we wanted to carry on with this is because this is very important, that we have a full understanding of why we're not able to have the accounts in front of us today. Thank you.
Good morning, committee. Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial. I'm here today presenting this paper on behalf of my colleague Heather Lappin, who's the Head of Strategic Finance, who's the original author. So, presenting a report today on the update to the delay of the preparation of the 22-23 final accounts, as well as a kind of brief overview of how we're going in terms of the 2021 and 21-22 statement of accounts as well. So starting with 22-23, the committee will be aware the statement of accounts are due by the current regulations to be complete in draft form for submission to Deloitte, who are external auditors, by the 31st of May. It's 2 months earlier than it's been for the last few years, and as a result kind of puts additional pressure on the team. The issuing of local authority opinions has been kind of significant local and industry press recently, whereby about 74% of the opinions from 21-22 were still outstanding at the 31st of March this year. So prior to signing off the draft accounts, the Section 151 officer, so Aidan Dunn, must consider whether he's got sufficient information available to ensure that the statement of accounts give a true and fair view and free from material misstatement. As part of some work we did earlier in May, we had identified there are 3 issues still outstanding in terms of the preparation of the accounts. So as mentioned before, the finance team is still dealing with multiple financial year close downs. They're dealing with 2021, 21-22, and then also working on 22-23. And this all is in addition to our kind of the kind of some of the business as usual activity that goes on in terms of doing the budget monitoring for the financial year that's just started, looking to set the budget for 24-25. So the finance team in the current situation are kind of time traveling almost in dealing with like 5 financial years all at once, which does put an enormous pressure on the team. We've also got some work around the end-of-year valuations. So the contractor assigned to undertake the valuations for the 22-23 close down had 350 assets of council's land and buildings. This work wasn't completed in line with the agreed timetable, and the contractor has faced significant resourcing issues. And then the council, to try and mitigate this, has now appointed a number of other contractors to try and kind of spread the load across a number of different contractors to catch up on this work. But again, they're also facing capacity issues, but we're all working as quickly as we can through this backlog. And then Deloitte have also advised that due to some of the delays on the prior year-end accounts, therefore it's unable to commence the 22-23 audit. So again, that work on the previous years delays some of the work at the moment. I'm joined on the call. We've got Pete Hopkins with me here, and also we've got Ian House on the line from Deloitte, who can answer some questions of some of those things in terms of specifics. We've also got, in terms of the previous years, so in past recent committees, Ian House from Deloitte has attended and provided an update on the 2021 and 21-22 work. Back in January 22, the original ISA 260 for the 2021 accounts went to this committee. However, there was then an issue around the valuation of infrastructure assets. So these are the kind of asset class which ultimately used to deliver services but can't be sold. So things like highways, footpaths, bridges, coastal defence, water supply and drainage systems. So things that you really can't sell, but we still need to have a valuation for as part of our accounts. There are some national issues around these, which has resulted to some challenges around kind of closed down work. In January 23, so January this year, CIPFA issued a temporary solution which features a change to the notes to the accounts to not report the gross and accumulated depreciation on these. And as part of this review, the council is working with Deloitte to review the depreciation values of our infrastructure assets. This impact, again, then creates a delay to the 21-22 accounts, which then rolls into a delay on the 22-23 accounts. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the 3 years of close down that we're working on. I appreciate there's lots of different years that I'm talking about in this, so I'm able to answer questions. And as I mentioned, I've got Peter Hopkins with me and also Ian House on the line, who may be able to answer some technical questions about their own areas of expertise.
Vice Chair, you have a question.
Yeah. That one. Yeah, thank you for that. Can I, by employing an extra contractor to fill the capacity that's not being completed by the original contractor, how is this affecting our budget? Because we're actually paying twice for the same piece of work to be done because the original contractor hasn't got the capacity.
Thank you for that question. We're obviously in engagement with the principal contractor and where we are taking work away to obviously look at the fee basis there, because obviously we do not want to pay twice. So that will come as part of the settlement of the accounts at the end of the process.
And how confident are we that this additional contractor has the capacity to, because you're saying that even the additional contractor is having problems with their capacity to complete the account. So it seems that we've got one contractor that's got capacity issues, and now we've employed another contractor who's got capacity issues. So how confident can we be about these capacity issues?
We've actually appointed 2 external additional contractors, as well as internal resources from staff as well, to balance that load out to make sure. The availability we have is obviously the other 2 external contractors have almost completed their work for their authorities they were already doing, so they are releasing capacity themselves to then drop onto our work. So we are seeing measured improvements now in the last 6 weeks with valuations coming through.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gray and then Councillor Robin Legg online.
Thank you, Chair. 8.3, item 1, the finance team are dealing with a number of issues. Can you give us a rough idea of how many? And later on in the report, it talks about not having capacity issues in finance. So these issues and audit issues have not been resolved, and any consequences of these will have prior year and thus potential adjustments on the account. So if there is no capacity issue, what is the issue? Is it a reliance on other departments servicing information? So it's sort of counterintuitive to say we don't have any capacity issues, but we have a number of issues that we haven't resolved. I'd like to know how many and what are they?
Who would like to answer that from the finance team? It's a good point.
Morning, Aidan Dunn, Section 151 officer. So it's a good question. It sort of feels inconsistent, doesn't it? So the issues ranging back from 2021 and 21-22, I haven't got the specific number of queries that we're dealing with at the moment, and perhaps Ian from External Audit could give us a flavour of some of the questions they're asking. The point is that the same team is trying to pull together the 22-23 accounts as well as manage the existing budget, and they keep having to go back, and it's the inherent knowledge of that team. They're sort of dealing with today's issue, then they have to go back 2 years, and then a year, and then sort of think about next year. So in the perfect world, what we're describing, if the audits had been able to be complete on time, and if we've been able to do the accounts this year on time, we have got sufficient capacity. What we can't effectively do, I don't think, is buy in finance capacity to deal with these issues because they're all running in parallel. What we can do is buy in additional capacity to do things like the valuation that we described earlier. So what I'm trying to make the point within the paper is that the finance team, I think, have done a really solid and thorough job in really difficult circumstances. And it's those circumstances that have led to the delays in preparing this year's accounts. So I wouldn't want the finance team to sort of feel as though they've let us down in that regard. And indeed, in terms of financial control and financial monitoring, later on today, the Cabinet paper for finance, which reports on last year's financial performance, that will be published. So there's that degree of the committee will be able to have the oversight of the finances. It's the accounts that haven't yet been able to be completed. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Gray? Pondering on that one. Okay, Councillor Robin Legg.
Thank you very much. As a relatively new member of the Audit Committee, can I ask the finance team what exactly is the practical significance of the valuation of the infrastructure assets? Obviously, you're trying to decide A, what the value of a road is, B, what period you're going to write down the value of that asset is. Does that have any kind of implications for the actual reality of when we get round to repairing something that's of critical importance to the infrastructure of the county?
So there's a national consultation out at the moment around simplifying the kind of accounting treatment of these assets for kind of exactly the reasons that you've raised in terms of what is the significance of the kind of knowing the asset value or something that you ultimately cannot sell. What are the kind of what's the person on the street going to use these values for? It's obviously a key part of our maintaining our asset base. So, for example, in terms of the highways, you often see councils reporting what the financial values are of the kind of cost of backlog of repairs or kind of conditions and suitability surveys. So it all kind of factors into making sure we're taking best care of these assets for the council. But in terms of the ability to kind of write down a value, like you may see if we purchased something more of a commercial asset and then the valuation change due to market conditions, there's certainly less risk in that sense on the volatility of these asset valuations.
Is that the answer you were looking for, Councillor Legg?
Well, I'm not sure it was entirely the answer I was looking for, because it's quite, as I understand it, it's quite a complicated question. But in a practical sense, if we write down the value of a road over, say, and I do remember once meeting one of the area highway directors, and he showed us a map of the area in the north of the county and said some of these roads on the present circumstances aren't going to be repaired for 100 years. And and this is some decades ago. I just wonder what the practical reality is if we've written down the value of a road to zero and it's still not being repaired. What are the actual implications of that from the authority's point of view? Or is this just another accounting tool that we need to deploy to show how the value of our assets is depreciating?
I've got a technical answer. Are you able to answer that, Ms. Coleman? So who's that online? Ian House. Yep, okay. Okay, can we ask Ian House if you wish to respond?
Good morning, committee. Ian House, a partner from Deloitte, responsible for the external audit. Councillor Legg, it's a very good question. I mean, essentially the infrastructure asset valuation that you see in the financial statements that we are currently in discussion with the council over, and you've hit on one of the key issues that Aidan referred to that is still ongoing, which is around over what period do you depreciate infrastructure assets. The reality is what's much more important is the revenue budget and what you spend on the roads in terms of what you're really concerned with. In terms of this, really the valuation is just something that gets added up across the country to form the whole of government accounts, and a lot of the work that we do on the sort of what we call the IFRS accounts, these ones that are delayed, is in order that government can report nationally on the sort of total value of assets being deployed by the public sector. And that's why there's a lot of work trying to be more consistent around the lives over which these things are being depreciated, and some of the valuation of it, which is what has caused the delay, particularly to 2021 accounts. But it's the relationship between those valuations and what's actually being spent on roads maintenance is really, there isn't much of a link between the two, other than it may inform us around what we think the useful economic lives ought to be.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher.
One's concern, obviously, is that where there are delays in accounts not prepared on a timely basis, perhaps become less relevant. And clearly this is an interesting matter in relation to the valuation of assets. Many of you will have read in the broadsheets yesterday about Canary Wharf, where there are issues about the valuation of assets and the repurposing of assets in circumstances where clearly there is a reduced demand for commercial premises. And clearly in the private sector, there would be great alarm bells rung if accounts were not prepared for our largest companies on a timely basis. One is also alive with respect to infrastructure assets, and putting on another hat here, that roads and tracks, etc., in the private sector are repaired using more modern methods, yet at the end of the day there is still a track or a road. And in the private sector, I don't want to bore you too much, tax relief is given, even though it might be deemed to be an improvement. And here, I just cannot believe that we are talking about accounts for such an accounting period that is now so distant.
I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. I think it's more a general comment, but looking over to Aidan, if you wish to.
Yeah, last week I was with colleagues for the Society of County Treasurers, so that's treasurers from across the country, and that was the general theme. The vast majority of local authorities are in a similar position to ourselves. They've got outstanding audits And the longer, as Councillor says, the longer the delay, the less relevant those accounts become, and that adds further pressure onto this year's accounts. It's a national issue which we're grappling with locally to maintain. How do you maintain the relevance of the accounts versus the currency of them? Thanks.
Absolutely. Councillor Gray, I think you had your hand up again.
Thank you, Chair. Just turning to 11.1, summary and conclusions. I can't agree with that statement. Just wanted to note that. I mean, Aidan's telling us that the finance team is a good standard, which I accept, good processes. Really, there should be something in there about focus on getting these accounts done rather than 23-24 and then the upcoming changes to the pension fund accounting. I'd like to see something in there about a focus on getting these accounts sorted. It's not acceptable for them to be 3 years out of date, in my view. And whatever it is that's holding him up should be the focus to get them sorted. Surely that should be in the conclusions. Thank you.
I agree. I mean, I think it is extremely frustrating, and I think what we're trying to do is to put in place the mechanisms to ensure what has gone wrong, trying to get to grips with them. And I think particularly the issue of valuations, you could argue that that is something that was within Dorset Council's gift to control, where the other things were not. Clearly, what can be done to ensure that commercial strategy or contract management or any future contractors do not leave us in that position. I mean, I'm not clear. If we'd had, perhaps a question to Aidan or Mr. Kramer is, if we'd had those end-of-year evaluations, would we have been able to have the draft accounts in time, or would those other closed-down issues still prevented them coming to this committee?
Thank you. It's a great question. So as Sean laid out in the beginning, it's a judgment. Do we publish accounts that are good enough or do we wait till they're perfect would be the judgment I'd have to make. I think if I did have those valuations ready, I probably would be in a position where I'd publish those, the accounts, notwithstanding we've got these outstanding audit issues which may change the start line as laid out in the report. So it's a judgment I'd have to take, but I'd err on the in that sense of keeping the show on the road. I'd publish that. I probably would publish, yes.
So Councillor Christopher, then Councillor Patstone.
I feel I must apologise to Councillor Batstone, who probably will think that she's in some mad discussion between people who are obsessed with accounting terminology. With respect to the previous speaker well knows that no accounts are necessarily perfect, and accounts do not show the true and fair view, but a true and fair view, whatever that may be. For those of you who hang on my every word in relation to the repair of farm lanes and tracks, etc., the established tax case is G. Pratt & Sons versus HMRC, which will get us absolutely nowhere. But the point is that if we are repairing our roads, etc., and keeping things safe and legal, then clearly we need to move forward with these accounts so that people do have an appreciation of the accounts, and that perhaps is the better thing to do. And I urge him to speak to the leader of the council to actually move forward in that way. Sorry, people may think I am the most critical of councillors, but I do find it disappointing that many months after the end of COVID, we don't necessarily have advisors in the room, but advisors appearing virtually. But that is a personal comment and criticism made by me and not naturally one made by my party. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think you need to apologise, Councillor Christopher, I'm there with you, but what I wanted to come back to was what Aidan said earlier about the state of accounts across the country. This is a country-wide problem. This is bizarre if we're all in the same boat because, okay, everyone's had COVID. We in Dorset had the additional complexity of bringing together the local authorities as one organisation in 2019, which I might well have expected would have given us some issues. But I just feel, Neil, I need to express my concern that if we've got something that's a problem across the country, we kind of need to look at what the heck everyone's trying to do, because it's impossible for the rest of them, not just us. Where are we going with this, Aidan?
If I could just quickly comment, and then perhaps this would be an excellent opportunity to invite Ian as our external auditor to give a perspective. I think just to be clear, the convergence, bringing together the Dorset Council's predecessor accounts, that was all done and dusted. That was all done on time. That sort of case closed on that. It's only since then that these challenges have emerged, not least sort of the availability and capacity within the audit sector generally as well. But perhaps if I could, through you, Chair, invite Ian to elaborate.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I think it's very important that the committee understands that these are national issues. And whilst there are things that the finance team can do, as they've set out in this paper, many of these things are beyond both mine and their control. We all have to work together within the system to achieve the outcomes which we all wish to see, which is these accounts signed off. It is fair to say that everyone is in agreement that old accounts are of very little value to anybody, but the processes need to be completed. The Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee is currently taking evidence from across the country from both the accounting bodies, the auditor, the Comptroller and Auditor General and others in terms of what has happened in the system and what can be done to resolve it. Some of it is resource issues, both in the finance teams but also in the audit profession itself. Some of it is related to the complex requirements of who can sign off these accounts, and work is ongoing to look at those arrangements. There's a lot of work going on, but mainly there is work going on to see what can we do to resolve this backlog position, and are there measures that can be taken when we get to a certain point in time whereby the value of that information becomes negligible. Is what can we do in those circumstances, and how can we close out the accounts? Proposals are being discussed at the moment with the department and with ministers around that, and I would hope to see something being discussed with Aidan and other representatives from the councils in July as to the way forward on audits that are not complete by certain dates over the next year, particularly given that new auditors are due to start work on the 23-24 accounts, and there needs to be some sort of handover and process by where that can happen efficiently. So there's a lot going on to try and resolve this at a national level. We would hope that between us we can resolve some of the things locally that mean we won't hit those backstop dates that are being proposed, and we'll get to the position of signed off accounts. Our teams continue to work closely together to achieve that, but there are some very complex issues here that we're working through. So I appreciate committee's concerns. I echo Aidan's comments that these are not just local issues, they are very much national issues. And I hear Councillor Christopher's criticism, and I'm going to try and make sure I can be there in person for the next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. House. Councillor Christopher, you wish to come back?
I note the comments of the previous speaker, and clearly there are issues arriving around revaluations, and on the basis that not everything is stated at historic cost. But there is perhaps still a disappointment in terms of the fact that there is not timely preparation of the accounts. And this may get a bit technical, notwithstanding that within any audit report, there is, of course, recourse to qualification i.e. the qualification of the accounts, or if not, moving to qualification of the accounts, disclosure of issues of concern by way of what is called emphasis of matter. So one is still concerned about the lack of timely accounts.
Thank you for that. I think that is noted. I think to get my head around the issues, I think the national issues, I think Mr. House, Ian House has explained, and we're well aware, and it's covered in the report. We're not unique in this. However, the local issue is, and what I'm perhaps not quite understanding is, when will we be in a position for those new contractors to have those valuations? You know, is it guaranteed? When can we have them? And then hopefully Aidan can give us those with that caveats that he mentioned.
So the finance colleagues are working closely with colleagues in assets and property, so Pete's team, around basically meeting every week to go through the schedule of work, so understanding where each contractor is in terms of the work assigned to them, the stage of each asset valuation, when we're likely to get it back, and then kind of cross-referencing that, how that valuation has changed, and then picking up any queries through that process. So we're meeting weekly, but in contact almost daily on this matter, and working as fast as we can to get through that backlog.
But do we have a target date?
So we're hoping to publish draft accounts into July.
Councillor Christopher?
One final point. I do think I may have the benefit of a discussion with the legal officer who sits behind me about contractual matters between the council and the auditors providing the services, but that perhaps will be in another time, in another place.
Okay, indeed. Well, I think we've certainly discussed that. I think we note with regret, I think is what we can say, and we look forward to the accounts coming to us shortly, and as soon as practical. But it is frustrating, and I appreciate that it's not unique to this council. Okay, I think we'll now move on to item 7, which is the audit and fraud whistleblowing. I think, Mr. Eyre, you're going to discuss this for us. Very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Mark Eyre. I'm the Service Manager for Assurance. So this is the third year that we've presented an annual report on fraud and whistleblowing activity, and it follows on from a recommendation that was in a South West Audit Partnership report towards the beginning of the life of Dorset Council of increasing visibility on fraud management. So the report covers two main areas. Firstly, it provides an update on ongoing actions being taken to improve our fraud management processes. The first part of the paper provides an update on progress made since last year, and as you'll see, the actions that were outstanding have now largely been completed. The one area that's outstanding is to provide some more focused training for higher risk areas above and beyond the e-learning that is currently available. SWAP have previously carried out a baseline report on our fraud management arrangements, and that showed that whilst we had numerous mechanisms and processes in place, at the point of the first review, they hadn't been fully completed or embedded. So at that point, of the 27 themes, 25 were showing as amber. They did a follow-up review in December 2022, and that showed a significant improvement. So now there's 16 of those themes showing as green and 11 as amber. So the 11 amber areas obviously will form part of our improvement measures for this year, and that includes things like extending that training offer that I've already mentioned, and also improving our communication channels. The 2019 SWAT report noted the need for a member champion on fraud prevention, and that was carried out by the former Chair, Councillor Hall. So, Chair, the report proposes that this role transfers to you if the committee is content with that. And finally, the report also summarises fraud and whistleblowing activity from the 1st of April to 31st of March. The details in there are quite brief, as obviously they're of a sensitive nature. But the 7 issues that are reported, There's one case currently still under investigation, and all others were not upheld. So hopefully that provides a summary of the report, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reasonably self-explanatory. Detailed report, and good to see that the progress has been audited by SWAP. You know, we're in a good position. I mean, any comments is obviously in times of financial hardship, the temptation for fraud increases, you know, by a large amount. I think there's a government estimate there's something like £33 billion of fraud in the public sector at this moment, which is quite alarming. And no doubt every council has elements of it, so we need to be really vigilant. So I'm very happy to take on that role of fraud prevention champion, not fraud champion, as I like to say. I think that's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? If no one's got any objections, do have any members have any comments on the report? Councillor Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not the report itself. I just wanted to make a suggestion in relation to the background papers. There are 3 background papers which are cited here. Is there any chance of letting loose a copy checker on those papers? Because if you look at, for instance, the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption strategy, if you look at that, you will find that we operate, and I quote, a zero-tolerance culture of fraud, corruption. A zero-tolerance culture of fraud, corruption. Now, what I think that is trying to say is that we operate a zero-tolerance policy towards fraud and corruption, but that isn't what it says. You can encourage, you can stimulate, you can hope for a particular culture, but you can't impose it in the way that you can impose a policy. So I think we're using the wrong words there, and what is actually there actually amounts to nothing. It's, as I've said before, it's a zero-tolerance culture of fraud, corruption. It doesn't actually mean anything. So I would suggest that these background papers could do with a fine tooth comb, because this happens quite a lot in those papers. That's all.
That's an interesting point. I'm sure Mr. Eyre can talk for that. They are obviously all policies are reviewed on a regular basis. I think the key thing is you know, if we get into semantics, is to set the tone quite clearly to all staff involved that we zero tolerance. You know, and the consequences are, you know, you're probably going to get sacked or disciplinary, or you're going to end up in court. And laying that down quite clearly, and that's clear to me, but I think you're right, it probably could be rephrased slightly. Mr. Eyre?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, and thanks for pointing out those comments. I will go back through and check those any typos or issues with it. But no, it's a fair point. Thank you. Accepted.
Okay, we've got Councillor Robin Legg online, and then we've got Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at paragraph 2.2 of the report, where it says the purpose of the whistleblowing policy extends beyond fraud to other perceived areas of malpractice, whether behavioural or procedural. One of the things that people often bend my ear about in my ward, and no doubt it happens widely across the council area, is people having complaints about process or procedure with the way in which planning decisions are made. Do we get a lot of complaints which are dealt with through this process, which are related to planning, or do they get sidetracked into a different area of complaint?
Thanks, Chair. So we have a separate complaints policy and process which would handle the vast majority of them. So it depends really on whether, I mean, essentially with whistleblowing, we're primarily talking about issues that are being raised by employees or subcontractors, agency staff, that sort of thing, where we owe them that duty for a protected disclosure. So in the vast majority of cases, those sorts of instances you mentioned would indeed get dealt with as a complaint under our normal complaints arrangements. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Legg?
Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure about everybody else, but I'm feeling totally inadequate. My colleagues' proofreading of the attached reports, my admiration. That wasn't my question. My question is 7 a lot? I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking, is that a lot? Is that not a lot? And the bit that's missing is what previous year's whistleblowing was. And I think that if it was in the report every year, it would give us some context to whether whistleblowing is going up or going down, or the sort of seriousness of the cases. Thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Eyre, sorry.
Thank you. No, so that's a really good point, Chair. I will take that on board for the next report and add those figures in. In terms of, haven't got the actual figures in my mind at the moment. I know there is a increase this year in terms of whistleblowing activity. I think that's probably more than anything because the communication has improved, which was sort of one of the key areas of focus. But I think it's a really good point. I will look to add that in future reports.
Councillor Troy.
Yeah, Chairman, this term whistleblowing, of course, is a form of slang in a way, and there's nothing necessarily wrong in that at all, provided we define it first, and I suppose it would be along the lines of exposing potential malpractice or whatever, and then use it. But don't use it in inverted commas, which the report does. I think it's in the report rather than a background paper. Don't then use it in inverted commas, because when you put inverted commas around a phrase in a report, it means, actually, I'm not quite sure what I mean here, but you know, don't you, what I mean? So let's not do that. Define it and then use it, but don't put the inverted commas around it. Because, you know, it could be a serious matter. And it is essential that we get the rules right and the language right.
Interesting point. I have no view, but it seems perfectly sensible to me. I'm sure officers will go away and think about that. I'm seeing Mr. Mayor do you wish to add anything to that?
Chairman, thank you. We can certainly go away and think about that, because what I think of as a whistleblower has a particular legal meaning, whereas people more widely might think of it quite differently. I think of a whistleblower as one of your own employees who is making a protected disclosure, but it does also have it's more widely understood a bit differently than that. But we'll think about how we define that in the report in future.
I think it's absolutely that we get these things right, and that we view it and we look at the progress as we do every year. And I think it is a really important thing, and I think the public expect us to take this very seriously. I think for the amount of money we spend, it is small, but that the risk is always there that somebody could be doing things that they shouldn't be. So we need to keep a handle on this and have these reports. But yes, all points taken. If there's no other questions, nobody online, no, I shall move on to item 8, which is a verbal update, I believe. Let's move on to the Jonathan, about the monitoring report on the Constitution.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the Constitution is a living document. We have to keep it correct and up to date. 2 things to report on, both of which are, I would put in the category of consequential changes and changes for clarity. So first of all, Article 6.13 of the Constitution, that requires the executive leader to maintain an up-to-date list of the responsibilities of others who are exercising executive powers on his behalf. And that list is in an annex to Article 6 to the Constitution. and I've arranged for that to be updated to reflect the reshuffle that the leader recently made to his cabinet, to reflect the changes, those involved, and the changes of portfolios. So that's the first consequential change. The second actually relates to the exercise then of executive powers. As a matter of law, the leader appoints the cabinet and can change who holds those cabinet posts and what their portfolios are. That's within the gift of the leader. What we've not made clear previously in the Constitution, therefore, is that in the event that a portfolio holder is absent ever, then the leader is able to exercise the powers of that individual portfolio holder on their behalf. I'm surprised it's not come up previously in the last four years, but it has come up now. And just for clarification, then making it clear that the leader can step in the absence of any portfolio holder and exercise their powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that self-explanatory update. Are there any comments on that? I shouldn't think so. We will move to the work programme. Just before we do to that table, to other issues that are obviously ongoing, which are not covered in there. I don't know if anyone's going to pick this up, is the subcommittee that this is to do with meeting times, which is subcommittee of this committee, which is meeting this Friday, and also an interview panel for the two independent members. I can't remember the date's been agreed on that, but I know some draft dates to hopefully get some people in place by September. 28th of July, Vice Chair has just reminded me. Okay, so we move to the work programme, item 9, which, I don't know. Mark, did you want to say anything about the interview process or how it's been going so far?
Well, just a quick update, Chair. So the advert is due to go live this week. So as you say, the interviews themselves scheduled for the end of July.
Excellent. Okay, so you've now got the table hopefully in front of you for agenda item 9, which is all self-explanatory. So Councillor Gray, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Given that we heard today that the accounts could be published in July for 2021 and 21-22, I'd like to see something on the work forward plan holding them to account for that, whether it be July or September for this committee. Because it's specifically giving us specific on an update, but what it's not doing is giving us a specific when they're signed off or when we can review the sign-off.
It's a fair point, and it's just saying report, isn't it? Mr. Dunn, do you comment on that, please?
I think, given the importance of the issue, to have an agenda item on both July and September, looking to receive the completed accounts as soon as they are available and an update on the external audit of those accounts.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I think we need to keep on top of this, and hopefully there'll be as soon as is possible. I don't have any, for item 10, I don't have any urgent items that I'm aware of. I don't have any exempt business that I'm aware of. So that is the case. That does close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you.